Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we are going to get into the second game of Magic Summer League basketball where they fell to the Toronto Raptors 89-86. We're also going to talk about a former Orlando Magic who should be on the move very, very soon. Some thoughts around Paulo Banchero as one of the next best up-and-coming players in the league, and finishing off with some thoughts from Jamal Mosley going into this offseason focused around what Tyus Jones and Desmond Bane bring to this team. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more episodes on a daily basis covering the Orlando Magic, giving you everything Orlando Magic basketball on a regular day-to-day basis. With all that being said, let's get right into today's episode, starting off with the Orlando Magic Summer League team taking on the Raptors, falling 89-86, as I mentioned before. And this game, very interesting game, because you have to remember, the Toronto Raptors, of course, their Summer League team plays exactly like how their main roster team plays. So that means full court pressure, wing versatility, flying around, super hyper dynamic in terms of switchability, a big focus on principal defense in terms of on-ball man-to-man focus, and your ability to be able to guard up in space. And this team made things in the very beginning of the game very, very difficult. It came to a point with this team in the first half, talking about the Orlando Magic, where they were struggling to bring the ball up the court due to to full court pressure and double teaming in the backcourt. There's some situations where Jace Richardson was really struggling, not necessarily in terms of turning the ball over individually, but there was a point where it felt like across the board, it just seemed like the Orlando Magic struggled to be able to get the ball up the floor. Noah Pinda activated big guard mode and changed a little bit of that. I thought that was a really good sign moving forward, because this is a guy who was able to kind of put them in position to slow things down. And it's funny, I was reading an article from the Orlando Magic Daily, shout out to them, and they were giving a lot of perspective around how this Summer League team is a really interesting reflection of not only the team that the Orlando Magic are coming from being just last season, talking about the main roster, but also a reflection of what it is that the Orlando Magic need this season in order to take steps forward. That mainly being a veteran presence that can help calm the storm and keep guys focused and put everybody in position to be able to combat things like full court pressure, multiple misses down the floor where it seems like things are not going their way, and then it turns into rush shots just trying to make something happen, right? And it's interesting because that's what, of course, Tyus Jones and even Desmond Bane to a lesser degree bring to the table, is the ability to operate better within a half-court setting, because they're able to help slow the game down. They help spread the floor in a way that makes them significant threats and puts them in position to be able to help others make really good decisions without the basketball in their hands, right? So it's interesting because if you look at what Jace Richardson was able to do, I believe he started this game 1 of 5, and in the second half scored 16 of his 19 points in the second half, and was able to really reestablish his three ball and get himself back put together. Now, again, you have to remember, this is an Orlando Magic team that turned the ball over 29 times. Again, when I'm talking about full court pressure from the Toronto Raptors, this is definitely a representation of what they do with Scotty Barnes and those guys, of having them attack full court pressure and putting two on the ball and almost operating like boxing one style of wanting to, or for those who are college basketball fans, the former Jim Boeheim full court pressure with Syracuse. This is a lot of what the Toronto Raptors operate off of. And with that being the case, they were able to score 44 points off of turnovers, 16 steals, and we're in a really, really interesting position. When you go down the actual list, 5 turnovers for Noah Pinda, 6 turnovers for Tristan Da Silva, who did have a pretty solid game scoring-wise. Jalen Crutcher and Alondis Williams each had 3 in this game. That's a lot of turnovers. Jace Richardson finished the game with only 1. I'll talk about him a little bit more in a second. But this is one of those situations that shows how important having a steady point guard can be, because the main Orlando Magic team did not necessarily struggle with turning the ball over, but as opposed to struggling with giving the ball away, they struggled with operating functionally in half-court sets in ways that didn't result in a Paulo Banchero shot, a Franz Wagner shot, or a shot generated from either of those two, right? So let's talk about Jace Richardson. Finishes with 19 points against 16 in the second half, really was able to settle himself down and get into a certain groove in the second half where it just seemed like he was putting things together. Him and Noah Pinda were much, much better in the second half entirely, scored 17 of his 19 points. I don't want to misnomer that. But I think his ability to get to the basket, I think Noah Pinda's ability to handle the ball in half-court settings, I think both of them being able to finish at the rim, especially Jace Richardson. I think he had a handful of really nice finishes where he was able to get things from the top of the key, create for himself to get a bump near the basket, and finish strong. Remember, we have to talk about the fact that Jace Richardson is relatively undersized. He's able to finish strong around the basket, something that was already kind of a high praise for him as a guy that, yes, is a three-point shooter for sure, but is a guy who can create his own shot and get to his spots and be a high-level finisher. So I look at this as being a really, really good game for Jace Richardson and Noah Pinda because they were able to show off things that are going to help them get real minutes on the big squad. Jace Richardson, in particularly, I think his ability to recover in the second half of this game is almost as telling as the actual stat line he finished with. Again, 19 points, 4 assists, 1 turnover. But I think it's more telling than that. I think his ability to recover, I think his ability to step in and not stop shooting is so important because that's going to be important from the guard position for the Orlando Magic because they need to be able to get generated offense consistently with Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner all off the floor. Jace Richardson is going to be able to get 10, 11 minutes a night and come in and be a knockdown three-point shooter or an instant offense guy who gets the ball in his hands and operates quickly. He has to be able to take advantage of those 10 to 11 minutes and create offense in a quick manner. And I think that his ability to bounce back in the second half shows that he's able to delineate the difference between having a rough shooting night in the beginning and understanding that the game still continues and he has to step up to the occasion in the second half and thrive within a role. I think within a reduced role on the main roster, this is a guy who's going to have to take advantage of the urgency, similar to the urgency of course, finishing in the second half, take advantage of the urgency of playing in such a confined amount of minutes. And it's going to put him in position, I think, to really be able to thrive as a guy who can just operate off of catch and shoots. He's obviously going to get easier looks as well with Paulo Banchero, Franz, and those guys on the floor as opposed to what he's working with in the Summer League team. For Noah Pinda, really quickly, again, as a guy who grew up as a point guard, I think seeing him being able to bring the ball up the court, break full court press, make high-level decisions. He finished the game with 14 rebounds. I mentioned this to you guys a few episodes ago. If Noah Pinda can be a Ben Simmons type, he had 9 and 14 in this game. Yes, I know I mentioned the turnovers earlier, but again, big guard, high pressure, was asked to do a lot in terms of bringing the ball up the court. It comes with the territory, right? But he finished with 9 points and 14 rebounds. If this can be a guy who can win the rebounding battle for you at the small forward, power forward position while still having on-ball guard level ball handling skills, that's going to be a guy that's going to be able to get legitimate minutes. That's going to be a guy that honestly could put you in position to play small ball more consistently because he can operate as a small ball point guard for you in certain pinches, right? So Noah Pinda, again, the stat line might not scream to you what Cooper Flagg did dropping 31 points, right? Or what VJ Edgecombe has been able to do, right? It might not scream to you that, but his ability to be effective where he's able to get a steal, get a block, 9 points, 14 rebounds, gets 2 or 3 baskets in transition, a handful of assists that lets you know that he can be a high-level passer. Those are the things that you want to see from Noah Pinda because those are the things that we know are going to translate day one on this team. Those are the things that you know are going to translate day one next to Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner in high-leverage moments, right? So I think that Jace Richardson and Noah Pinda specifically showed off a lot of high-level play that's going to get them a handful of minutes on the big squad and allow them to produce. And if they don't, they're going to dominate the G League playing the way they're playing right now because individually, they both are playing towards their strengths in a real way, and it's reflecting in the early stages. And mind you, both of these games that they've lost to the Raptors and Kings were very close losses. If I'm not mistaken, they were dang near the exact same score as well. This is a team that just needs to learn how to finish games. And honestly, I believe the first half was more so just an unfamiliarity with full court press. Again, this is something that we don't see very often, and more specifically, again, dating back to like the Jim Boeheim Syracuse teams with Dion Waiters and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and even before then, obviously, but those teams in particular, like this is not a play style that you see very frequently and definitely not around the league. It really is a style that the Toronto Raptors have adapted and then kind of put their own flavor onto with the way that they've built their roster. So with that being the case, this is a team that I think has a chance to be able to still, play relatively well through the rest of Summer League. And we'll, of course, stay updated on all of that as well. But through 2 games, I like what I've seen from Jace Richardson as an on-ball creator. And I think that Noah Pinda so far, if we're ranking the Orlando Magic's young players coming into the season out of Summer League, I think Noah Pinda actually has been the most productive and most interesting rookie out of everyone. And I also think that's in comparison to Tristan Da Silva, who I think has been a really good scorer through 2 games. But I just believe that Noah Pinda right now, if I had to rank them in terms of performance to productivity going into next season, if we're talking about what it looks like on the next squad, on the big squad, I would say that I like Noah Pinda the most. I like Tristan Da Silva next, and Jace Richardson is right there with Tristan Da Silva. But I think that because of the guard depth that Orlando has, Jace Richardson might still end up be looking at some real struggles in terms of getting on the floor initially. But Noah Pinda, I think, might be the most special prospect out of this. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually gets a lot of tick this upcoming season, even if it's not necessarily on a per-minute basis. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a lot of tick because there's a lot that he brings to the table. Let me know if you had to rank those 3 guys going into the upcoming season in terms of who you want to see get the most minutes on the floor. You guys let me know. Again, I'll list mine. Noah Pinda, Tristan Da Silva, then Jace Richardson. What would your rankings be in terms of who you want to see on the floor with the big team the most next season? I'll be looking in the comment section to hear what you guys have to say. Let's go on to some quick news real quick. Cole Anthony was obviously moved to the Memphis Grizzlies in the Desmond Bane trade. Given the fact that the Memphis Grizzlies are a young developing team with a significantly deep squad already, Cole Anthony is set to be waived by the Memphis Grizzlies and likely to be joining the Milwaukee Bucks. For those who do not remember, I relayed the report on podcast that another former Orlando Magic guard in Gary Harris is also on the Milwaukee Bucks. Cole Anthony should be able to go into a situation where, again, there's not an entirely set rotation when it comes to guard depth for the Milwaukee Bucks. The Damian Lillard waiving, obviously, it was a significant hit from a talent pool perspective. I do think that Cole Anthony brings a much-needed offensive punch for this Milwaukee Bucks team that does really, really need on-ball shot creation on the perimeter, especially when you given the fact that their next best on-ball shot creator is probably Kyle Kuzma, which is a pretty scary feat when you really think about it. And I think that more than anything, the most important thing for Cole Anthony is, and this is just us as Orlando Magic fans looking at what we want for a guy like Cole to be able to produce, because, of course, we want him to be able to thrive wherever he is, right? I think his biggest thing is he just has to be able to step in and be an offensive force. He has to be able to be a Jordan Clarkson. He has to be able to be a Colin Sexton type. He has to be able to step up into those positions, because when I look at the depth chart, Kevin Porter Jr. is probably the starting point guard for them. I wouldn't be surprised if Cole Anthony was able to start on this team. But you have Gary Trent Jr., more of a knockdown, catch and shoot three-point shooter type. Kyle Kuzma is an on-ball generator, but a guy that you don't necessarily want to do it more than 11 to 12 shots a game type of level, maybe 15 max. Giannis Antetokounmpo is an on-ball creator, but more of within the style of driving, and has operated better as a mid-range shooter over the last couple of years. And of course, Miles Turner, stretch big, play finisher, rim protector. But it gets spooky after that. The re-signing of Ryan Rollins. AJ Green is more of a knockdown shooter himself. Gary Harris, again, more of a defensive specialist type guard that can shoot the 3-ball at a relatively decent clip. Taurean Prince is not really an on-ball shot generator. So Cole Anthony instantaneously becomes maybe the second best behind Giannis Antetokounmpo, the second best on-ball shot generator in the league. I mean, not in the league, excuse me. The best, excuse me, oh my goodness. We wouldn't have traded him, right? Cole Anthony instantly becomes the second best on-ball shot generator on the Milwaukee Bucks behind Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is one of the best on-ball shot creators in the league, is I guess how I meant to phrase that. Which means he could start. Cole Anthony could start for this Milwaukee Bucks team, given what he brings from a skill set perspective. The biggest difference, I think, is that Kevin Porter Jr. might be a higher level passer than Cole Anthony right now, and I think that's really important when you think about what they need in terms of having a three-point shooter like Miles Turner, three-point shooter like Kyle Kuzma, three-point shooter like Gary Trent, three-point shooter like AJ Green, three-point shooter like Taurean Prince. Like, when you look at the construction of their roster, they need a guy who is able to high-level facilitate, and Cole does not necessarily bring that. He is going to play a Jordan Clarkson, Lou Williams, Colin Sexton type role. He was asked to do that for the Orlando Magic, but I think it's more prominent on this Milwaukee Bucks team. So shout out to Cole Anthony for being able to find a situation where he should be able to get some instant tick. I think he's automatically the second string point guard at worst case scenario above Ryan Rollins behind Kevin Porter Jr. And there's a real world where he could start just because his offensive generation is so important to a team like this that doesn't have a ton of on-ball creation on the roster. Predict the stat line for Cole Anthony next season. I think this is a guy that can average like 12, 15 points on this team. I really do. Next up, let's talk about what Matt Barnes had to say about Paulo Banchero. We've had this conversation about people believing that Paulo Banchero could be in the conversation, could be and should be in the conversation for face of the league in the next, iteration of NBA superstars. You have to remember, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul's last season is this year, LeBron James. Like, if you go down the list, some of the superstars that we all grew up on, they're slowly but surely going to be walking out the door. You know what I mean? And that means that we need a new crop to take over and step into that fray and hold this league up. Matt Barnes says, one thing I wanted to touch on was Paulo. How we're continuing to have the conversation about the face of the league and who is going to be the American player, and his name is not being thrown out, Rachel Nichols, but he has been nothing but absolutely incredible. He added, big 6'9", 6'10", the versatility. He's a dog. I'm a big fan of Paulo, and he should definitely be in the conversation of the faces of the league in the next 3 to 5 years. Rachel Nichols kind of steps in and adds some more to that, saying, I don't disagree with you. By the way, winning Rookie of the Year launches you into the conversation from the start. Just that alone, paired with the fact that obviously, one of the players they want to peg as face of the league, especially from an American-born perspective, are the Cooper Flags. And, of course, Anthony Edwards was the big topic of conversation for this past season. Paulo Banchero definitely deserves to be in the conversation. He brings everything to the table as a three-level scorer, a guy that can be a 35 to 36% three-point shooter, a guy that is a high-level passer, a guy that can put the ball on the floor and finish around the rim, draw contact. Again, I've mentioned this on the podcast many a times. His rookie season, he was putting up Shaq free throw level numbers when in terms of getting to the free throw line on a consistent basis with near 8 to 9 attempts per game. That's ridiculous for a rookie to be able to get that kind of whistle coming into the season, right? A guy who's able to put up 25 plus points per game and able to raise his play in the postseason in terms of being able to produce as the best player on the team and not only bring what he did during the regular season to the table, but elevate himself in postseason play against high-level competition. Obviously, again, we've had this conversation before about Paulo Banchero, so I don't want this segment to go too long beyond what I've already said about him. But as a very complete player at the forward position, has already put himself in all-star contention, already won Rookie of the Year, already a guy that last year could have been an all-NBA caliber player with the way he was playing in the beginning of the season. This is a guy who has top 5, top 10 in the NBA written all over him. He's a guy that I feel like at his baseline will be in the conversation that Jason Tatum is, where he's at baseline in the top 5 conversation just always kind of falls around 4 and 5. That's the baseline for Paulo Banchero, I think, especially when you consider guys like Anthony Edwards still being around, Victor Wembanyama obviously being a guy who many discuss as a unicorn of the league. But I think Paulo Banchero is a guy who, over the next 3 to 5 seasons, can elevate himself into the conversation of consistently being in the talks of being not only the best player, but a guy that should be amongst his peers in a ranking of the top 10 at worst. At worst. Because I think Paulo Banchero has already earned the gratitude of being considered as a top 4 to 5 player minimum at his position. Top 4 or 5 player at his position, obviously being, power forward, small forward. I think if you definitively call him more of a power forward, he might be closer to top 3, in my opinion. Paulo Banchero has definitely set a high bar for himself through the first handful of seasons of his career. Me personally, I think the conversation around Paulo Banchero being face of the league is one that needs more uptick, and I would not be surprised with the way the Orlando Magic have expectations coming into this year, not only internally, but by the media to produce at a high level with the roster they have. I think this is going to be the biggest microscope that we've seen over the last handful of seasons for Paulo Banchero. I would not be surprised if people are having more conversations about him as a face of the league kind of player, and I would not be surprised if he rises to the occasion this upcoming season as a guy who plays to an all-star and all-NBA caliber level and continues to make people realize just how real that kind of conversation should be with his name at the forefront of it. You guys let me know in the comment section down below, where does Paulo Banchero rank amongst power forwards going into the 2025-2026 season? I kind of casually threw that out there about him being top 5, top 3. I do think there's some reality to that, but I don't have the list sitting right in front of me. So you guys let me know. You guys give me where you think Paulo would be in that ranking, and then give me your rankings for your top 5 power forwards going into 2025-2026. Interesting to see where that would land, because I actually think that Paulo Banchero at the power forward position might be a lot higher than a lot of people are giving credit. I know Giannis probably sits right there, and then it depends on whether or not you qualify KD as a power forward or not. But after you get past those two guys, I think Paulo Banchero has a really good case for himself. But that's just me. And we're going to end with a little bit of a heartfelt story. This one's not necessarily anything too deep, but it was Coach Mosley talking about the chemistry that Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones bring to the roster in terms of why they were so important to acquire this summer. And I thought it was really important. I want to actually touch on what he said about Tyus Jones just as much as what he said about Desmond Bane, because I think that the stuff that was said about Desmond Bane is kind of understood given his connections with Tyus. So there's a lot that goes there. So Tyus is actually more of the bigger glue guy in all of this. Let me start by saying what he mentions in the beginning, which is these guys stay connected throughout the summer. They've reached out and they text message each other. They're staying connected that way. And I think that that's so important for this group just to continue the chemistry of what our core guys have already built up until this point, and adding Desmond, who is someone that fits. Now let's go to what he said about Tyus, because I think that further adds to what's going on. So what he says is, you got to think, he played with Desmond for years, talking about Tyus playing with Desmond Bane in Memphis. He knows Paulo because of the Duke connection. He's from Minnesota, where Jalen Suggs is from. He's an old head in Minnesota, so to say. And then there's Wendell, who also was at Duke. So with adding a star player and a role player famous for making everyone around him better, the Magic should be one of the favorites to win the East, especially since they did not compromise their defense at all in order to improve their offense. Shout out to NBAanalysis.net for that final paragraph there. Tyus Jones, I do think, I preached this so much that I thought Tyus Jones would have been the best offseason acquisition, with the mid-level exception, that the Orlando Magic could have made. Beyond Ty Jerome, beyond going after a guy like trading a smaller asset to get Colin Sexton, beyond going after Anthony Simons. My personal opinion, I think I mentioned this on a previous episode when I had to rank the kind of guards that I think would be most interesting for this Orlando Magic team if they had to go acquire somebody in the open market. that Tyus Jones was like at the top of my list of guys that the Orlando Magic should, would, and could be targeting. And it's because of those connections. It's because of what he's brought to the table as a guy that's operated as a connecting point guard in the past for the Phoenix Suns, for the Washington Wizards, for the Memphis Grizzlies. Mostly for the Memphis Grizzlies, given what he was able to do on a high-level playing team as well. This team's camaraderie is going to be so important this upcoming season. They've addressed the depth. They've addressed three-point shooting. They brought in 2 coaching minds that add player development and offensive growth to the roster. The team is going to internally develop over the fact that they're going to have another summer to gel and play together, coming off of a year where they weren't able to play with each other as much due to injuries. They're going to be hungry because they're coming off of yet another unproductive postseason where they were only able to win 1 game in a series. This Orlando Magic team has a chance to not only be one of the hungriest young squads going into next year, especially watching the Oklahoma City Thunder win a championship, but this team has the chance to be like one of the most dangerous squads coming out of the Eastern Conference. Tyus Jones and Desmond Bane, say what you want about being undersized, not necessarily being star caliber players. These 2 players bring something to the table that I think is going to unlock the Orlando Magic roster in a real way that is going to make them a top 10 offense next year. And I think they're going to remain as a top 10 defense next season. And a recipe to win a championship in this day and age is an all-star caliber takeover player, which the Orlando Magic have in Paulo Banchero. A significant co-star that can take the burden off of the star player and pick things up when things are going slow in Franz Wagner. Significant depth at all positions to be able to withstand through injuries and continue to have high-level play and versatility, which the Orlando Magic addressed. High-level coaching, which they addressed this summer. And then a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense, which has been a standard for the last 5 to 10 years since the Golden State Warriors established that in a real way, dating back to 2015, 2016. The Orlando Magic have a perfect recipe after adding Tyus Jones and Desmond Bane to this roster to be a championship team next season. And I think that they have the real capability of actually getting that done. And I would not be surprised if a month into the season, a lot of people are singing the same tune. But with that being the case, guys, this is another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. I will talk to you guys tomorrow for more updates around the Orlando Magic Summer League team and any other news going on with the Magic. But until then, peace.